You know, sometimes I feel like God hates me. Every year it's the same thing. Christmas rolls around and I temper my expectations by asking for something simple, like for Capcom to start caring about Mega Man again, and instead I end up with games like this. And I know, we have plenty of great games to choose from nowadays, but I just keep hoping for something that'll capture the magic of all the games I grew up with. While newer experiences like this might be hard to come by, I've realized there's a whole nother world of games that never made it outside Japan, with hidden gems from the past just waiting to be discovered. So today, we're gonna bust out the old PS1 and take a look at niche classics like Planeto Double. I am just so confused. Why is this game doing this to me? This game was developed in 1999 by Microvision and was apparently produced by a Japanese band called Date of Birth. It appears they've released music between the mid-80s and the late 90s, with this game's soundtrack being their final release. The soundtrack itself is actually pretty catchy, and I'd honestly recommend you give it a listen. As for the game, it's pretty wild. It starts off with a cutscene showing this alien named Dob flying in a spaceship, who then gets distracted by a neon sign and decides to investigate. It turns out to be a trap, and Dob is pursued by an evil scientist named Dr. X. Dob then crash lands into the Earth and is captured and hooked up to a memory capture device. The doctor chooses a random test subject and hooks him up to the machine, and you're sent into Dob's brain and tasked with exploring his mind. It's definitely an unusual concept, and the FMVs are so trippy, it all contributes to the bizarre atmosphere. The levels are also super colorful, like a unicorn got into a fist fight with a box of crayons, and the character models are very strange looking. Gameplay-wise, it alternates between a point-and-click style control scheme for indoor areas and third-person controls with fixed camera angles for outdoor areas. The main goal of the game is to collect all of these things called bits. They can be found roaming around, but will sometimes be hidden, requiring you to draw them out with your horn. Each time you collect a new bit, a new instrument gets added to the background music. It's pretty cool, and music is a big part of the game. When you collect 3 bits, you can cash them in to level up, and after reaching a certain level, you'll unlock a mini-game. The game itself is definitely charming, but it has some drawbacks. Collecting the bits can be a little time-consuming, as it will often require you to go around and do favors for NPCs like in Shenmue. The highlights are definitely the crazy FMV sequences, the hectic atmosphere, and the soundtrack to tie it all together. But aside from that, I can't really say I had much fun while I was playing it, and I think this game would be a little hard for me to recommend playing for an extended amount of time. Definitely check out the soundtrack though, it's pretty good. The next game we'll be taking a look at is Kanako Enomoto's Junk Brain Diagnosis. Apparently this lady is a model in Japan, having appeared in a handful of magazines in the late 90s and early 2000s. As for the game, I'm not really sure who this is made for. It's basically a mini-game collection where you spin the lady to determine which game you'll play. J for J-video game. Each game is intended to diagnose the player's mental state, and they vary from rhythm games to animal races to this falling object game that tests your reactions. Green, that's green, kind of. What? Oh, come on, it has green. What is wrong with you? And there's also a game where you have to step on cockroaches to protect cherries. It's definitely an unusual game, and if you fail, she'll appear on screen and scold you. The games themselves leave a lot to be desired. They tend to drag on and aren't all that exciting. Still, the pacing and structure of the game did kinda remind me of the WarioWare games, and this kinda feels like a precursor to that style of game, which I thought was pretty cool. It's just not very well executed. There's also a multiplayer mode where you can play with up to 8 friends, but I don't have any of those. Overall, this game is hard to recommend. The minigames are a little shallow, and the whole experience didn't grip me the same way that many other classics like Playing With Yourself did.
sucks ass.
Next up is Rakugaki Showtime! This is a really neat game published by Enix in 1999 and developed by Treasure, the same guys who made Wario World. It's a battle arena where all the characters look like crayon doodles, complete with Rayman-style floating limbs. The game puts you in a variety of stages where you'll have to battle enemies to win. There are a bunch of projectiles scattered around which you can throw at enemies, making the experience feel like a chaotic version of dodgeball. The mechanics are pretty fun once you get the hang of it, though I do think the controls could use a little more agility. A lot of the difficulty comes from enemies who are simply faster than you. Each character also has a unique moveset, like this girl who's basically Chun-Li, or this little guy who reminds me of the Chows from Sonic. My personal favorite though was Rayman Sasuke. His attacks made it super easy to corner enemies. Besides that, there are several unlockable characters, including this one from Mischief Makers. Unfortunately, this game had a very limited release due to a legal dispute between the developer and publisher over character ownership. As a result, it was pulled off store shelves, making it super rare, and copies can be pretty expensive nowadays. If it weren't for that, I'd imagine this game would have been released internationally, and it probably would have gained a pretty solid fan base. Sure, it's not mind-blowing or anything, but between the unique art style and fun mechanics, it's a good game. You can also play with up to 4 players, so I think this will be a great party game, and I definitely think you should check it out. So the last game we'll be looking at is, well, actually, I don't know. There's literally no title on the box art. So this game is apparently called
Germs, Nerawareta Machi.
It was developed by Kai in 1999, and it had a low print run, making it one of the rarest and most absurdly expensive PS1 games out there. And I'm gonna tell you why I feel sorry for anyone who's dumb enough to pay that much for this piece of trash. Life is water. Slowly you surf from the sea. So right off the bat, I think we need to address the writing. This is actually an English patch, which is awesome, but I'm guessing some limitations led the text boxes to read in an unusual way. To be fair though, it sort of fits the game's bizarre atmosphere. You play as a reporter, and the game starts out in your office. While checking your emails, you see a news report about UFOs in the sky. There's also a message from your friend, Fujita, who warns you about an unusual activity at the nuclear power plant and invites you to his house to learn more. As soon as you press the circle button to stand up, you immediately realize how janky this game feels. The camera moves with the left stick, and triangle and X move you forward and backwards. It's like Resident Evil 2, but in first person. The game also appears to have a day-night system, which is pretty cool. But when you get outside, you'll notice the entire town has no color. Apparently, this is intentional, and I really don't know why. Only indoor areas have color for some reason. The environments are also massive, which might sound nice, but they're mostly empty. It also took me 9 minutes to drive to Fujita's house, and the car controls are even worse than the walking controls. You steer with the bumpers, and the roads are so narrow you'll constantly clip the sidewalk, which abruptly stops your car. It's super frustrating. Indoors, you move even slower and are not able to run. This can be really annoying, especially since the game's many identical looking areas make getting lost a guarantee. So what happens when we meet Fujita? Well, he shows us his glowing bowling pin and gives us a gun and tells us to go to the nuclear power plant. He sounds like a very stable individual. At the plant, we're denied entry and have to sneak in, at which point you'll have to defeat the guards who attack you. Here, we have 2 weapons, the gun and a baton. I chose the gun, because it's a gun, and this was my first mistake. The bullets have RNG, and whether or not you'll actually hit what you're aiming at is entirely up to chance. The enemies work the same way though, which can be pretty hilarious. As you can imagine, this was very annoying and I died. I was so frustrated with the horrible controls, I was ready to give up. But then, something totally unexpected happened.
What the hell is going on? Whoa.
Instead of restarting, you respawn in a room full of aliens. It turns out they've taken refuge in an old mine and are waiting to invade the planet. This part of the game was really intriguing. Wandering around and talking to the weird NPCs pulled me right back in.
I allowed to show that?
It turns out you're actually not supposed to know any of this yet, since you weren't supposed to die in the beginning, so your only option is to reload the game and try again. And I have to admit, after spending some more time with the game, my initial impressions might have been a little harsh. The experience really starts to open up after the first mission, letting you explore the world more freely. You can choose how to spend each day, and there are a bunch of missions for you to tackle. They often involve you interacting with NPCs as you investigate reports of suspicious activity, and finally ending in a boss fight with mutants. Unfortunately, this is where the janky controls really do become an issue. It really feels like they tried to put combat in a game that just wasn't designed for it, and while it is possible to beat the bosses by just walking in a circle and attacking, even this is extremely clunky and tedious. Each major encounter took several minutes to complete, and it really doesn't feel good to handle. Now, I'm sure if you played this on a totally real and legitimately obtained PS1, you could totally rebind the controls and make it feel more smooth, but overall, the game's premise is genuinely interesting, and I do think it's worth giving a try. Just make sure you know going into it that the controls are horrible, and please, whatever you do, don't spend a ridiculous amount of money for a physical copy. And that wraps up this year's adventure of bizarre PlayStation games from Japan. While I wouldn't say all of them were fun, I do think we found some pretty neat hidden gems for the system. Hopefully you enjoyed learning about these games with me, and if you did, make sure you leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos. Let me know in the comments section what PS1 games you'd like to see me talk about next, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.